All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started. I'm not standing on high because I'm holier than thou. I'm just trying to stay as far away from you as possible. We have gathered this evening for the inaugural meeting of New Life Congregation, still in the process, of course, of being officially formed. But it is always our privilege as Christians to consider how it is that God wants us to carry out our gospel ministry and to also issue calls to people, to Christians, to do that work on our behalf. So that's what we're gathered here this evening to talk about, and then also make some resolutions and then vote on those resolutions as well. So without any further ado, let's begin with a prayer and then we'll get started. Dear Heavenly Father, in Christ Jesus, you give us all things. Most of all, you grant us the precious gift of your love and forgiveness and the certain hope of life everlasting. We thank you that in this Christmas season, you've once again given us opportunity to consider that great gift of love wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying on a manger. And we praise and thank you for the salvation that you give us through the life, death, and resurrection of your Son. We thank you for all the other privileges and rights that you grant us as your dear children in this world, especially the opportunity you give us to proclaim the good news of salvation and forgiveness to the people in our communities, our neighborhoods, and in our world. We thank you also this evening for bringing these congregations in Kenosha together that we might more effectively and efficiently carry out gospel ministry here in our community. Grant us wisdom in our discussion this evening. Grant us patience and love as we work through new issues that, of course, we've never worked through before together, knowing that in all things you work for the good of those who love you, and you grant us success according to your good and gracious will. It is in Jesus' name that we pray all these things. Amen. Pastor Newman is not feeling well today, so I think he's joining us via our YouTube link, but he did ask me to serve as the moderator this evening. We, of course, are not operating technically under a constitution or bylaws because those aren't in place yet, so we're always kind of figuring out how best to do this. So I'm not the chairman. I even looked this up on Google. What's the difference between a moderator and a chairman? And a moderator just tries to keep order. A chairman, he's more directive. So I'm just going to basically serve as moderator this evening, call on people as we discuss together the issues that the Lord Jesus has placed before us. Earlier today, I think all of the congregations sent out information that is now also available in print on the back table there, where we asked people to sign in for our meeting tonight. This is the document through which we are going to go this evening. And there are several recommendations that are being brought from not only the Joint Church Council, but also from our Joint School Board as they've worked through the many issues, of course, that are required to be worked through as far as the school goes. We're going to take it in order this evening just to present what the recommendations are first as far as pastoral calls and assignments go. Then the chairman of the Joint School Board, Mr. Dave Wilbeck, will take us through the recommendations as far as the school staff goes. And then we're going to look at some preliminary budget compensation numbers that not only the school board, but of course also our finance committee has been working through. And then when it comes to dealing with the things we need to make decisions on, we're actually going to take them in reverse order. We're going to talk about budgetary things first, then the teacher calls, then the pastor calls. For this reason, normally, of course, when a congregation extends a call, there's a budget in place. We know what we're going to pay this person. That's all kind of been worked out in advance. With this situation, of course, we have about 1,000 different moving parts going at one time, and we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page as far as some of those initial compensation ideas and recommendations, and then to move actually to addressing the calls not only to the teaching staff, but then to the pastor staff. So unless I hear some strong objection from the group, that'll be the plan for this evening. Hearing none, let's take a look at the recommendations from Joint Council as far as the staffing for the pastoral staff of New Life Congregation. First, we're going to have 4 main ministry sites, even though one of the sites will actually be shared, at least initially. The 4 main ministry sites are the current Mount Zion site, the current Frieden site, the current Bethany Summers site, and then also the Reach Ministries that's already operating at Bethany Summers and is, Lord willing, eventually planned for a Pleasant Prairie facility. So the idea is that there would be a lead pastor for each of those ministry sites or locations. The recommendation is that Pastor Steve Newman, who currently serves at Mount Zion, would be the lead pastor at that Mount Zion site. This site, the idea is, it would be kind of the administrative and educational hub of the congregation. Pastor Newman would serve as the lead preacher and Sunday morning Bible study leader at that site. He would work with a local ministry committee at that site, made up of members who attend regularly there, to lead ministry operations, to oversee outreach efforts specific to this site, to provide pastoral care and counseling to congregational members who make this their home site. Pastor Newman would also help oversee the general administration of the congregation and take the lead in congregational adult spiritual growth. Geographically, the Mount Zion site is the most central of the sites, so we thought it made sense for that to be also kind of the administrative and also educational hub of the congregation. And Pastor Newman is gifted in those areas of administration and education. It made sense to ask him to serve as lead pastor there. Going on, lead pastor at the current Bethany Summer site, Pastor Dave Pagel, who currently serves Bethany, Summers, and Kenosha. This site would serve as the Northside Outreach and Campus Ministry Hub of New Life Congregation. Pastor Pagel would serve as the lead preacher and Sunday morning Bible study leader at that site. He would work with the local ministry committee at that site to lead ministry operations. He would oversee outreach efforts specific to that site. He would provide pastoral care and counseling to the congregational members who make that their home site. And Pastor Pagel would help oversee congregational outreach efforts and mission development. There, he's kind of tied in with the Pleasant Prairie development as well. He's on the development team working to get things started there in Pleasant Prairie. And then third, lead pastor for the current Frieden site, Pastor Mike Gordy, who does currently serve here at Frieden's. This site would serve as the center for hospital and shut-in visitation of the New Life congregation. It would be the hub out of which those visits are made. Pastor Gordy would serve as lead preacher and Sunday morning Bible study leader at this site. He would work with the local ministry committee at this site to lead ministry operations. He would oversee outreach efforts specific to this site, provide pastoral care and counseling to congregational members who make this their home site. Pastor Gordy would help oversee the visitation and care of hospitalized and shut-in members and specialize in senior ministry. A key word here is oversee. That doesn't mean that we're asking Pastor Gordy to make all the shut-in and hospital visits, but we're asking one of the pastors to be responsible to make sure that if someone is hospitalized, they get a visit. If we have shut-ins, they get visited. So we're asking him to oversee that effort, of course, with the help of the other pastors as well. And then the lead pastor for Reach Ministries, Pastor Russ Goggins, who currently serves a congregation in Racine, but also St. Luke's here, as well as the Oasis Youth Center here in Kenosha. This ministry will serve as the Lutheran Contemporary Worship site, as a pilot for congregational growth groups, and take the lead in promoting community service projects for the New Life congregation. He would serve as the lead preacher and Bible study leader with Reach Ministries. On the backside there, he would work with the local ministry committee at this site to lead ministry operations, oversee outreach efforts specific to this ministry, provide pastoral care and counseling to congregational members who make this their ministry home. Pastor Scoggins would be a main community contact, mostly because he's the best looking of us all, for the pastoral staff, and also maintain regular contact with Shoreland Lutheran High School. We feel like to have one of our pastors specifically assigned not only to continue contact with our own congregation members who attend Shoreland or prospects who attend Shoreland, but just generally to have a presence at Shoreland from our congregation here in Kenosha and Summers just really made sense. And Pastor Scoggins actually has already begun to do that almost from his first days here. Then the other two pastors. First, a congregational pastor, Pastor Scott Bergeman, who currently serves at Mount Zion. We, as a congregation, would ask him to oversee urban ministry and mercy ministry efforts in Kenosha, to oversee congregational youth ministry, something he currently does at Mount Zion, to be the pastoral advisor to congregational special needs ministry, which he does already at Mount Zion, to be a pastoral advisor to the Oasis Youth Center that is planned to shift to this Frieden site when we are able to open up again. Also to be a pastoral advisor to the Choices of Life Pregnancy Counseling Center, which is currently operating out of the St. Luke's facility, but again would be transferred to this facility. And then to be a supply congregational preacher and teacher. While the other lead pastors would be the main preachers at those sites, Pastor Bergeman and I would also fill in rotationally at the different sites. Not only to, of course, give our brothers some relief in the pulpit and teaching, but also to highlight some of the ministries that we are especially involved in for the entire congregation. So it would do some of that cross-pollination that we're looking to do as a congregation, one congregation, multiple sites. And then finally, the school and early childhood ministry pastor, yours truly. The school and early childhood ministry pastor would oversee the spiritual care of the entire school and early childhood ministry, including children, family, and teaching staff. Oversee determined effort to connect non-member families, and really member families as well, to a regular use of the means of grace. To assist in school outreach efforts and program development. To work side by side with the school principal and staff in matters of school administration and student discipline. To oversee confirmation instruction and worship life at Kenosha Lutheran Academy. And to also be a supply congregational preacher and teacher. Just to go back to, for instance, Pastor Gordy's call. Of course, currently he serves both as the church and school pastor here at Frieden's. Pastor Pagel and I share that responsibility at Bethany. The goal of this would be that the other pastors, while they would certainly be involved in school ministry, would have no responsibility toward school ministry. That would be off of their plates so that they could concentrate specifically on the congregation that they're called to serve at their specific site. So they would certainly be asked to be involved school-wise, but not be at all held responsible for what happens as far as the school ministry goes. So that's the idea, and those are the recommendations from the Joint Church Council. Are there questions or any need for clarification? This is not the time to debate it, just for clarification. Larry.
Yes, as you went through all the different locations in the document, there's no mention of utilization of the Bethany Kenosha site. Could you expound on that and what you might see potentially in the future for it?
The question is, what about the Bethany Kenosha site? There was no mention of service there. The initial plan, the ministry configuration plan, is that the Bethany Kenosha site, as far as worship goes, would only have a Saturday evening service. That tends to be about the best attended service of the three that are currently at Kenosha. So as we discussed the possibilities of how to place pastors and make ministry most efficient, we thought, let's maintain that Saturday evening service at Bethany Kenosha. And the people that would make that their home, which we assume would be a pretty limited number, the at least initial idea was that they would be under the pastoral care of the pastor, the lead pastor at Summers. And we assume that many of them would be former Bethany members. So that's the initial ministry configuration plan. That facility, as far as church goes, would only be utilized on Saturday evening. You have a question online?
Yeah, question from the internet. Will Pastor Scoggins still serve in Racine as well as Kenosha?
We will not let him go to Racine. Nope. This would be a full-time call for him. You should be aware Pastor Scoggins is currently holding a full-time call to serve the new joint congregation in Racine, which is what, Water of Life? Is that what they call it? Water of Life, or are going to call it? So we're in competition with Racine for the services of Pastor Scoggins right now. Won't be the last time he'll get a call someplace else. Other questions for clarification? Back here, first.
This question is specific to pastor-specific, but under each of these pastors, it says overseeing outreach efforts specific to the site, or specific to the ministry. Does that imply we're having separate evangelism efforts on each site, or is it going to be one continuous work that be working?
Yeah. It would be I think it would be a hybrid effort, certainly. Congregationally to the whole community, let's say for instance we decide to send out postcards as a congregation. It might go to all the community and have our different sites, and these are the available times for Christmas or Easter. But we're really asking the lead pastors to think neighborhood-wise as well. It's a little bit different out at Summers since it's not in the neighborhood. But to think of outreach efforts within the neighborhood, to try and bring people in from your neighborhood, to think through those specific outreach efforts. Just, for instance, where I've served in the past, something as simple as handing out flyers if there's some event within the neighborhood, making contacts with people in the neighborhood. So that was the thought there, those specific outreach efforts to that specific community. Because the congregations are in distinct communities, even being as close as they are. Oh, and then Derek, sorry.
What's the timeline?
Timeline in terms of when this would begin, the timeline is we're working with July 1st, 2021. So essentially 6 months from a couple days ago.
So, for example, with Pastor Scoggins, he wouldn't come into his new position until July?
Correct. The plan would be for all of the pastors to carry out their current calls until June 30th, and then we would begin with the new congregation and the new assignments starting July 1st. And I'll be honest, I haven't looked at a calendar to know if July 1st is a Sunday or what. How's that going to work? But yes, that's the plan. July 1st would be the start.
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday, she says. So it'll probably be July 4th is a Sunday, huh? Okay, yeah, of course. So no one will be in church for the first Sunday no, everybody will be there. Those are the pastoral assignment recommendations. This is a proposal. And again, just for clarification now. Seeing no need for further clarification, I'm going to hand, oh, are you okay? Oh, he's going to use that one. I was going to say, are you okay breathing my air here off this mic? Hand it over to Mr. Dave Wilbeck, who serves as the Joint School Board Chair.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay in this microphone in the back? Good, thank you. Good evening. My name is David Wilbeck. I do serve as the Joint School Board of Education Chairman. And And I just wanted to say that thus far, it's been a real privilege working with all the different people from all the different schools and churches, whether it be the joint finance team, the combining of the Board of Eds. I personally have been a little more inspired working with everybody. I think we've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time, and I'm excited about where we're going. So I want to keep that positivity thing, that I feel like we're making the right decision here. In terms of the presentation in front of you, the joint board got a chance to, of course, develop it, but then we also reviewed it and approved it officially yesterday. Things have been moving quick. I know it's only been 2 months, but 2 months is not a lot of time to put this kind of stuff together. Essentially, as Pastor Prangy alluded to, there is no bylaws or exact approval authority. I would say we're moving in a direction that everybody's kind of nodding their heads to. So a lot of what you're going to see here are things that were already presented to you in a manner in the joint survey and the larger unification summary that came out a couple months ago. So in that regard, I'll kind of go into it. The first and largest is to call Principal Dave Leonard as the principal of this new school. He would be the first principal of Kenosha Lutheran Academy. And the second would be to call Pastor Peter Prangy as the school pastor. And with those split sites, we would have an upper and lower campus. The current K4 at Friedens would relocate to the Bethany location, which I'm just going to start referring to as the KLA lower campus. And so the lower campus would be a K4 through 3rd grade, and then the KLA upper campus will be from 4th grade all the way to 8th grade. And so with those two campuses, we would have Mrs. Jill Hagedorn as the vice principal of the lower campus, and Mr. Dave Zank as the vice principal of the upper campus. As you look at our current model, there's a lot of direct lines to our principals at both sites. And now that we're expanding and growing to a larger faculty, we need another level of administration in there. And if you look at the joint survey, a huge beacon that was coming up as weaknesses was the principals, as you're currently scheduled, need more administration time. And as you're proposing to join, they need more administration time. This is how you elevate your teachers to better performance. And I'm not talking about teachers having performance issues. I'm talking about good teachers and making them even better, and great teachers even better. Everybody should be challenged. And so when you add that level of accountability, classroom oversight, that only benefits the teachers and the students. And so by not just Principal Leonard, but having two vice principals is going to do that. The next one is to call Miss Lena Peterman, who is our current first and second grade teacher at Bethany, to serve as our music director. This would be a halftime school call and then a halftime church call. So we'll be taking her out of the specific classroom, but she would then teach music for the entire grade school. And of course, if she's teaching the music, that means that in-classroom teacher has a little bit of downtime to correct papers or address certain issues with different students. So as we look a little bit later at the classroom teachers and the numbers, I want people to be aware that we're building a lot of release time for the teachers. And then just as you're looking at the model, we're proposing to call for an MLC graduate to serve as our English Language Arts teacher, or ELA teacher. When the joint school boards got together, we took we had a lot of discussions about the time or the talents of everybody. And not that we don't have anybody that could teach English, we certainly do, but we had, as we put people with their strengths, this was kind of the one that we didn't have a really strong person for. And so we felt like calling a specific person to do the departmentalized ELA in the upper grades was what we need. And then how did that become a graduate? That's a little bit of a function of budget, but also a function of, I think, again, the strong administration, the strong team of teachers that we're building, and the ability to train a fresh graduate to be a great teacher. They would not be left to their own. We would have a great mentor assigned and great leaders above that person as well. And then, this is not a small bullet point, but just to call all the existing teachers to serve in a like capacity. You know, part of the things that we kept mentioning was we're going to take our called workers and emphasize their strengths in this new model. We're not merging together as schools because we're failing. We're doing fine at a school level. We're merging together because of the synergy it creates and because of the larger joint church effort. And then just a couple of notes, you know, we at Bethany have the retirement of Principal Steve Schultz. Again, I always bring it up. It's got to be a crazy time for him after all these years of ministry to deal with a joint church and school merger and COVID, and really thankful for all the effort he's been putting in. Certainly he's counting down his 6 months of ministry or so, but I mean, he is very vested and involved in all these decisions. And then Mrs. Sarah Schoenfeld, just wanted to make it apparent that, again, we're not consolidating or taking away any called workers. This is just a situation that, as we discussed it with her, she would not be able to take a full-time call. And so we're still in discussions on how it's all going to work next school year. But just wanted to make it clear that that was not an elimination. I covered that first tab. I certainly won't speak as long on the rest of the tabs because a lot of the feedback or clarification will probably come up in questions. But again, we're not just thinking about the people. We're modeling for our enrollment. We're modeling for tuition costs. You can see a lot of the explanations on the things we're proposing. You can see a lot of what we're expecting for enrollment. You know, we're feeling pretty good that 204 students is what our projection is going to be. That's less than what we have now. We are conservatively projecting. Certainly with a joint church and school merger, there could be some attrition. And part of the reason we're here tonight trying to call our teachers, because this is the first domino that's going to fall, right? We're going to establish our teachers. Now the teachers know what they're teaching. We can update our website. All the teachers can have their picture and their description. When we do open houses, and I'm not just talking about open houses for the new potential members. I'm talking about open houses to make sure that all our existing students and families are comfortable with this transition, meeting the new teachers, doing all the things we should be doing. We got to get the teachers in place, the grades in place, the admin in place, and that's why we're really making a push to do that now, because we want to get this stuff ready to go so everybody can start moving.
Do you want to break there and just ask for questions
Sure.
or clarification? Are there any questions or need for clarification on that portion of his presentation? Was it your intention, or did I miss it? Did you go through all of the grades and the teacher assignments? Did I miss it? Was I not paying attention?
I went through the larger grade, or the larger...
Do you want to just, because you referenced it in your bullet points,
Yes.
the teachers and the grades.
You're saying go to page
Go to
5
page
of the
5.
summary, and then just open it up from questions from there?
Just questions from there, yeah?
Okay. Yeah, so questions on anything I presented, or you can turn to page 5 as well and kind of see the names with the classes. I'll expound a little bit further and just solidify that in our lower campus, those teachers are assigned to that grade. The kids, the students are in there the entire time. With Mrs. Jill Hagedorn teaching K-5, that's going to be kind of a half-time to 3/4 time call. We're not having a called worker to relieve her for those, so she can do those admin duties. That'll come out of a teacher's aide. And we have a lot of great teacher's aides, which I'll cover a little bit later. But otherwise, in the 4th and 5th grade at the upper campus, those grades as well are sole classroom classes. They're not departmentalized. When you get into 6, 7, and 8, those are the ones that are departmentalized, meaning the students have a set homeroom, but then the teachers are teaching the various subjects of expertise: math, English language arts, science, history, etc. How specifically are those things going to break down? I mean, we have a very good high-level view of it, maybe even more than that. Once things get approved and in motion, then the principal and the board of ed, and the faculty and vice principals, we start block planning. How is this exactly going to work? Who's going to be where at what time? I mean, it's typical in a school year that all that stuff happens here in the 3rd and 4th quarter or over the summer. But we really got to get these dominoes in place. So I'll pause there for questions.
So now, questions or need for clarification on that portion of his presentation? Looks like they're really satisfied. Oh, there's one from the internet.
I think I answered this for them, but maybe for clarification. How will the church choirs be handled? Lena is the Bethany Church choir director, and the internet is asking to repeat if they're
Yep.
Sure.
The question is about church choirs, and that's something that will have to come at a later time as far as that decision. Anybody else? Oh, there's one.
Correct, yes.
The question was, is the early childhood ministry or center going to be separate? Yes, the plan, the current plan is that the early childhood ministry would fall under the auspices of the congregation, not under the auspices of the school. And of course, we have some work to do also just figuring out how early childhood ministry is going to look. So that's, yeah, not part of the discussion this evening. Back here.
Along the same lines, what about before school and after school care?
Before school and after school care.
Our goal is to have before and after school care at both locations. All right.
Okay?
I guess I'll skip, or not skip, but I guess I'll move into the salary comments, which is the last section. For the most part, I'll let the details speak for themselves, but I will say what you're not seeing presented formally is a full and detailed school budget, which is kind of what created the comfort and numbers behind being able to offer the calls. Keep in mind, we're not just doing calls today, but the call needs to include a compensation figure, a health insurance figure, a SICA bonus, just kind of the full package. Our called workers deserve to, when they get that call, to know what they're accepting that call to. And so that's why they kind of go hand in hand. So we did put together a pretty well vetted draft toward that along with the joint church team. And so some of the things that went into the modeling are shown here. At a high level, I would say that all of our called workers are making what they were making or a little bit more, if that is a question. And that's partly because of the similarities between the Frieden's budgetary process and the Bethany one. It was different, but the numbers kind of netted out to a pretty even amount. The big items to mention, though, are the housing allowance, which at Bethany, we're in the middle of a 6 or 7 year plan. We're in year 5 of it. So our called teachers are getting $8,000 a year for their housing allowance. And the Frieden's teachers are getting $12,500. And so as we looked at what we wanted to there, we moved everybody up to that $12,500 range. So keep that in mind a little bit, that Bethany housing went up, because that segues into my next point, which is the health insurance. The Bethany health insurance is on a VIBA plan. The Bethany health insurance is on a VIBA plan 1 that's fully paid for, and the Frieden's is on a VIBA plan 3, which in addition to being a plan 3, the actual employee is actually paying 10% as well. And so what we're looking at doing for the budget at this time, and certainly this will come up here in a little bit for required actions, but we're proposing to go with a VIBA plan 3 for everybody, which would eliminate the 10% contribution from the employees for the Frieden side. And when you look at the deductibles, you would think that really the housing allowance increase kind of offsets that deductible increase for the Bethany. So we felt that that was fair and equitable at this time, which also includes an HSA account, of which the church and school would finance $500 for individuals and $1,000 for others. That's the plan. Certainly we would like to do better if possible for our called workers, but without a final church and school budget working correctly, we didn't want to start them at one place and then have to move them down. If we can start them here, that's going to be a part of their call, that's fair. If we're able to do more as we get deeper into the church and school budget later, we can adjust that. But what's going to be a part of the calls as proposed is that plan 3. So a lot of time was spent on that insurance, and I don't know that the time spent on it is fully done, because there are some different ideas out there, but that's what's kind of on the floor today. With that, I would open it up again.
Just break there. Are there questions on what was discussed there? First, I saw internet question.
Yep. I tried to answer this, and I might not have answered it correctly, but between the two sites, how will transportation work?
Between the two sites, how will transportation work?
I mean, the regular busing that's a part of the KUSD.
We have confirmation there will be busing
will be busing to both sites, confirmed by Principal Leonard.
KUSD will bus to both sites of the city.
Okay. Mr. Dubus?
Dave, when you were talking about the insurance, you said currently the staff at Freedoms was under a level 3 with a 10% that they contributed, but then you also said, as you were talking about it, unless I misunderstood you, that the proposal was that everybody would move to a 3 without the 10%. Did I misunderstand that, or?
That is correct.
The question was,
You're
would
forgetting to
this
repeat the
proposal be everybody moving to a level 3 insurance, but that the 10% contribution on the part of the called workers would go away, be eliminated? And the answer was, yes, that's the proposal.
On the time starts with parents who have children at both locations. If we're going to start at the same time, that may put them at risk. Are we looking at that also from a school board perspective?
The question was, I'm remembering to repeat the question now. The question was, will the start times and end times be staggered for the families that have children at both locations? And the answer is yes. What is that today? I don't know, but we want to make it convenient for those families because they do exist. There's a fair amount of them from the internet.
Back to the transportation, a remark here, I was told by KUSD, they will not bus my child north of 75th Street.
I was told by KUSD that they will not bus my child north of 75th Street.
Well, we called today and we were told that they would bus to both campuses because we are now one school, not two separate schools.
They would do that according to Principal Leonard because we are one school now and not two schools.
However, we can definitely clarify.
Yeah, there will be a lot of those details, of course, that will need to be sorted out for sure. Any additional questions specific to this?
Regarding the compensation package changes, we got input from the teachers that this will impact, because these numbers, I don't know what this means on a day-to-day check basis for them.
Have we received input from the teachers on the compensation package?
The answer is the teachers have been made aware thus far of the calls and the requirements. The exact dollar amounts they haven't seen. If and when the voters approve that tonight, we'll be issuing the actual call packet, which will have those figures. But when we did present all their positions and broadly talked about health insurance and the housing allowance, we did mention that as we were running all of our things for every single worker, nobody was in the red making less. Everybody had a net positive result. Again, health insurance is a little hard to quantify if you're in bad health over time. I mean, there could be a lot, but generally speaking, from a compensation standpoint, everybody is in the black.
And just so that everyone is aware, generally speaking, the way our congregations run their budgets is there's always a 1 or 2% increase in salary based on years of service. So the point that David's making is from this year to next, the budget, the compensation as it was put together, each of the workers would see an increase to their salary next year, in line with what we've normally seen with called worker budgets.
Ron has two questions.
Ron? The question was about the health insurance plan, getting more information on the health insurance plan?
Was this maybe in regard to moving to a Plan 2 at this time or waiting? I think is that maybe what it was, Ron? Yeah.
Plan 3 versus Plan 2 of Wells Viva. There was a discussion on the Finance
There
Committee.
was, I guess yes, the insurance issue's been perhaps what I'll call the elephant in the room, because it doesn't affect all of our call workers. We went round and round through, and there's still
work ongoing. In fact, one reason why we're not going to call the pastors to a specific compensation package tonight is we're still crunching and running through some of those numbers. It is, as Dave, I thought, put very well, we took a plan that will be the bare minimum, and hopefully we can upgrade that one. But right now, I think until we know more, now the plan is, just so everybody knows, the plan is that the leadership groups will be seeing the full budget. Scott, help me out here if I'm wrong. Probably by the end of February, before the end of February. And our hope is that the next board meeting in March would have your pastor calls, the compensation piece nailed down, and the full budgets for the school and church in a March, probably a March or maybe end of February, but no later than March for sure. So at that point, Ron, we finalize that piece if there is still left to go.
You answered the question. Basically, what was the overall response from the big members going with?
Mixed, I guess I would say. There was mixed, I guess. Some of you are here today. I guess mixed would be a good way to call it. Strong consensus. Boy, I would love to. A number of the members are here. I would say it remains a work in progress. We are still exploring a health reimbursement account option to see if that could potentially save call workers money. What I do know about that is it would cost the church more initially, but could cause a significant boost to what could lower what the cost would be for our call workers out of pocket. But I think it's mixed.
I would add on to that, so the question from Ron was just what was the exact decision from the joint church finance team? And like Greg said, it was mixed. You know, we're talking about $50,000 about moving from, or 45, something like that, moving from a Plan 3 to Plan 2, and about $76,000 to move from a Plan 3 to a Plan 1. So, I mean, we're talking about a full employee or an employee and a half with regard to this. But to Ron's specific question, as I stated earlier, we're not really under any formal agreement. We're all moving in the same direction. We're all trying to make decisions with people shaking heads and discuss things when they're not. And so I think in this aspect, we had some strong supporters to move forward with a Plan 2, which maybe we'll get to. But I think the more conservative approach was there's some people that want to wait and see where the numbers pan out. And I think rather than go too fast, we'd rather kind of make sure we're bringing everybody along at the same time.
And I'm just going to briefly restate what Greg said since he wasn't speaking into a microphone for the benefit of those watching. Currently, the plan is to stay at the Wells Viva 3 plan, which is the least expensive. That's the baseline we're starting with budgetarily. If it's possible to improve that, that's the goal, but it's just too early to know at this point. And the plan is for us to be able to see a full budget, Lord willing, by the end of February. That can be discussed and, Lord willing, approved at some point in March at a congregational meeting.
Yeah.
Was that good?
And also, don't say it regrettably. I mean, we have a lot of Freedom's faculty that are paying 10% toward it, and we're eliminating that. I mean, that's an improved position, and maybe we can get more. So don't think about it reluctantly. For the Bethany people who are affected, again, they had that housing allowance bump, so you know there is a little bit of an offset there. So I think we're making a strong decision there, and maybe more to come. Any other questions?
Are we expecting the called workers to hold the calls until a budget is approved so that they know that the compensation numbers are legitimate and clear?
And I would speak boldly on that, that the proposal is to not wait for them to hold the calls, that We're looking for an action to make calls today with compensation figures that are set in stone, that cannot change, that would not be reversed. And that again goes to the decision of maybe being able to increase that health insurance, but not promising it. The call in front of them that they're going to review and consider is a Plan 3. And to that end, I think we've also, I don't know if we put it as a requirement or just a strong ask to review the calls and to get back to us by the end of January.
And Greg kind of let the cat out of the bag, and that was fine. He's already stated, the plan currently is that we will actually not be issuing pastor calls tonight, except the proposal is that we do issue one to Pastor Scoggins, who's in a more of a limbo state than the other 5 pastors, and that we would wait to issue calls with compensation numbers for the pastors until the budget is clearer and in fact approved. So that's also why we're doing this then in reverse as we work through these resolutions. I don't think Pastor Bergman heard that before. I told the other pastors, but he came in a little later, so he might not be here anymore. All right? Other questions or things that need clarification?
Good discussion, great questions.
As far as what you would like to present, you still want to look at tuition numbers? Tuition costs? Or, because that was part of your packet.
It is part of the packet on page 6, the proposed tuition costs. I was going to let the reader kind of digest that with the bullet points. I guess the only thing I would mention on tuition, and this is a broader comment on, you've heard us talk about the school budget, the church budget. Well, why does any of that matter? And the reason it matters is because the cost of education, as you see on this sheet, is $8,300. It's actually a little bit higher than that, but that's the most you can charge for school choice. But just thinking that it's $8,300. So when a member of New Life Church is going to send a child to the school, the difference between that, say, first child rate and that cost of education is paid for by the church. The school was never going to be self-sufficient unless we charged everybody $8,300. And that's not the way it has been. That's not the way we're proposing it. And so as you're having this reliance on the church, which again is historical, but it's important to make sure that the church is comfortable with, say, a Plan 1 health insurance or calling 3 more people. I mean, we really need to go with what we're comfortable with, and then after we kind of dig in deeper, that's when we can kind of grow. Certainly you can imagine that giving has probably been down given the COVID pandemic, and really kind of waiting to see all those Christmas gifts. I mean, I just kind of wanted to take a moment to explain kind of why we're at and a little bit of a higher comment on why we keep talking about the budgets. Does anybody have any questions or comments on tuition?
Any questions or comments on tuition? Otherwise, Mr. Wilbeck, does that complete everything you wanted to present?
It does.
All right. Are there any questions or any need of clarification on anything that's been presented thus far? If not, I would recommend that we open the floor for now discussion and debate on the compensation part of this presentation, which is on page 4 of 7. Again, the recommendation is that we would begin with a baseline health insurance plan, the Plan 3, with a health savings account set up by the congregation for contributions to that. I learned last night I've never had a health savings account. Not only can the church, but the workers can actually contribute to that tax-free. So there could be tax benefit, or there would be tax benefit to workers if they want to contribute money to their health savings account. And it doesn't expire, right? You can carry it from one year to the next. So that's the proposal as far as the health care, the health insurance, I should say. And then also to raise the housing allowance to $12,500 for each of the workers, which is the rate at which Frieden's teachers have been compensated as far as housing allowance. And then the rest of the salary is really just a product of the WELS compensation chart based on years of service and what you're asking your called workers to do. There are different categories, columns, in terms of level of responsibility. And so the rest of that is just a function of going to that compensation chart as far as the salary goes. And you see how those are outlined there from grade C up to grade G. There are also some additional bonuses, a $1,500 bonus for those with a graduate degree. And are there any other teacher, there's a SECA bonus, which is the Social Security part. Both male and female teachers now, according to a ruling from the IRS, are eligible to receive a portion of their salary as a parsonage allowance, which is a taxable deduction. And then also, our female teachers will need to make quarterly payments as dual tax status, self-employed, but also employees of the congregation. You might not know that about your pastors. They're self-employed and yet also employed. I've never quite figured out how that is, but it's the U.S. government after all.
I would just make a quick comment on compensation, and that again is, I know you're not seeing the dollar amounts. You're not seeing each teacher and using your own eye to confirm that they're making more, that they're being compensated accordingly. I believe at Bethany, we were prone to include that in the budget in that level of detail. I believe at Frieden's, they had not. They kept that held back a little bit. I don't know which way is right, but I think it probably makes sense maybe to keep that. But just know that not only the Board of Education, the Joint Board of Educations, but the Joint Church team has seen this in full detail. And that joint finance team is comprised of, I think, 8 members of all the congregations with expert accounting and finance ability. They've proofed this out. We've had 4 or 5 meetings ranging from 2 to 3 hours. The numbers are well vetted for what it's worth. And that's kind of what these people are volunteering to do, and we're not elected, but are serving on this committee because it's their level of expertise. So while you don't have the numbers in front of you, know that it was well vetted, and they're telling you what they're comfortable with. They told you they weren't comfortable with the Plan 3 VEBA. It's not just a liberal, let's move forward and do everything we can. There were a lot of cautious discussions had throughout, so I just wanted to add that comment before we make an actual action on it. Pastor Gordy, an internet question.
Internet question.
What about called workers who have insurance through a spouse who is also called in VEBA? Would an HSA still be available?
The question is, what about those who have spouses who provide insurance for their families? Would they also have a health savings account set up for them, as well as those, for instance, who you have 2 called workers within a family? Maybe one like Jill Hagedorn, for instance, her husband Jason is called at Shoreland. Would she receive a health savings account?
I'm not an insurance expert, but I would think that if they're not taking our insurance plan, because in order to get an HSA, it has to be a high deductible. If you're not taking our insurance plan, you would therefore not be eligible for an HSA contribution under those parameters. Again, Greg or Paul, correct me if I'm wrong. If that is something that I'm wrong about, we do have faculty members that are on their spouse's health insurance. That definitely can be the case.
I will just offer this clarification as one called worker who has seen how the numbers look. Just personal perspective. Under this plan, compared to what, for instance, the Bethany called workers have at Bethany with that high-level insurance plan, the risk to the called workers under a level 3 plan, of course, is if you get sick. I always say to my wife, the best insurance plan is don't go to the hospital. Don't pay anything, right? But if someone gets sick, then of course there's going to be more out-of-pocket expense to the called workers. The difference with Bethany workers under this plan. But of course, the Bethany workers are also getting a bump in the housing allowance that they don't currently have. So again, kind of a net. A net zero, I guess.
Going back to that question about the HSA, we will research that a little bit deeper. I want to make sure that that's accurate, and if not, we probably would consider contributing that $500 or $1,000 because it would be a spouse.
David, my recollection from the spreadsheet I saw was that those who did not have
Right.
a new life insurance plan, did not have an HSA.
Right, but it's more about legally allowable, I
Okay,
think was the
legally
question.
allowed.
Scott?
And Dave, the way you stated it was correct.
Right. But I guess in a roundabout way, I'm wondering if that spouse who has the insurance, they might have an HSA. Could Bethany contribute to that other HSA? And the answer is no. There we go. Put it in stone. Thank you, Scott.
Larry?
Yeah, I only got one point of confusion here as we went through this discussion. We're talking about the compensation for our workers, and I'm good with all of that. And yet, for some reason, we're saying we should be able to move ahead on this resolution. We should be able to move ahead on our teachers and school staff on those calls, but we can't on the pastors because we don't have some financial information. I'm very confused by what's missing that applies to the pastors that doesn't apply philosophically to our call workers.
So the question is, if we're in agreement on the compensation levels for the teachers, then what's stopping us from also moving forward with calling pastors and giving them their compensation plan tonight? And that's not just necessarily addressed to Mr. Wilbeck, that would be addressed, I guess, to Greg as well as Finance Committee Chairman and anybody else on the Finance Committee who would have some perspective on that.
I guess I'll start, and then I'll certainly follow on with the rest of the finance team. As some of the finance team is aware, thank you. We were debating that as recently as not very long ago. The issue is that there's just so many more variables on the church end. Dave can really come close to nailing down, as long as you're making enrollment projections, counting on your school choice revenue to be the number that it hopefully will be, and to conservatively estimating a contribution from church to school, you can nail that number reasonably well down. Now, there's risks in budgets. We're earlier than we should probably be, and we're doing that because we want to make sure our called workers in the school understand they have a position moving forward and a ballpark compensation. Some of us would agree with that point that in a perfect world, all calls would have been delayed until we have all budgets nailed down. In fact, I know Doug's here. I don't see Doug, but Doug was here. Oh, there he is, right in front of me. We had that conversation just literally minutes ago that should everything wait. But I think Dave has articulated the need, and some of our finance team has also agreed. We need to get the teachers' calls. Our pastors, on the other hand, they know they have positions. They know that they will be compensated fairly. The insurance piece would be wonderful to nail down for everybody a little bit further. We can't. There's more uncertainty with church revenue. I'll give you two numbers that maybe some of you don't know. At Friedens, if you're a Friedens member, and I think Pastor Gordy articulated this yesterday in church, our revenues through the end of November were down $30,000 versus a year ago. Mount Zion's numbers, if I believe Marty and Dick, I know Dick's here for sure. With masks, it's hard to see who's here. I believe Mount Zion's giving for the first 5 months of the year was down $18,000. So it's very difficult to project what's going to happen post-COVID, because really, let's all pray, right, that we're talking July 1 to the next June 30th. Let's pray that we're not wearing these and that we have more people in the pews than what we've had. But we are going to have to trust in Him above, right? Because we don't really know. I mean, no one in this room knows what the giving level is going to be fiscal year June ending 2022. We just don't know that. And that's really what we're trying to project. So I hope that helped. Great question. But we're going to hold off on the pastoral side. And that was a very, very, again, Ron, to your point, there was mixed discussion on that right up until this meeting about should we issue pastors a call on exactly the same piece. Because we have a spreadsheet that already has all those numbers in it. That's how Pastor Scoggins is going to be paid, on the same format that our teachers are being paid. So we're just going to, at the end of the day, hold off on the pastor's side because we believe that our pastors can understand that concept.
Right, and just, I would say again, to reiterate one thing that you just said, the difference between the 5 pastors, not including Pastor Scoggins, but the 5 pastors and Pastor Scoggins and the teaching staff is, should it happen, for instance, that the budget comes back and you say, you know what, 5 remaining pastor guys, we're just not going to be able to afford all 5 of you. So would you be willing to have your name put on a list and be called to serve someplace else? There's a calling aspect that could rectify that budgetary concern. That's not, of course, the goal, but at least that's a possibility. With the teachers, their calling window ends, April 15th? So we want to give the teachers an opportunity to consider a call to this new entity, where if they would decide not to serve here, then they would ask to be put on call list to serve someplace else. And the same with Pastor Scoggins. He's in a limbo situation. The other 5 guys, we haven't talked to all of them. I think Scott might be hearing it now for the first time. The other 5 guys, I think, I speak on behalf, I know of Pastor Newman as well. We're comfortable waiting, knowing that this congregation is going to do the very best it can for us. And a little known fact from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I don't like to broadcast this too loudly. Pastors actually work for free. Okay? That's what St. Paul says. I work for free. If you want to pay me something, that's your right and even your responsibility. But we do this for free. So as far as compensation goes, yeah, Terry's talking to Dave right now saying, did you know that? This is a mutual trust type of thing, and I think those 5 remaining pastors, we all feel comfortable that the congregation is going to do its best. So enough said.
More comments, more discussion. Otherwise, I would take a break just for a little joke. Did you guys hear that the Bears won yesterday? A trip to the playoffs, that is. So anyway. Any more discussion? Otherwise, at some point, we will need to get into actions in that reverse order, and I might turn it back over to the moderator. Some questions are popping up.
It seems with the tuition structure, proposed tuition structure, that you're banking heavily on 60% of the revenue coming from school choice. Is that a reasonable thing that's not going to change dramatically after COVID and makes a change?
Question is, it seems as if the school budget is leveraged highly on school choice income, 60% of the income from school choice. Are we expecting that to hold?
Yeah, as we look to merge these 2 schools, certainly Frieden's percentage on its own is higher, Bethany's is lower. As we merge, we're going to be at that 57% mark. And is there a risk there? I don't think that there's a large risk of students who are already ingrained into the school, they're set up, they're on school choice, they're here. I would think that as they look at this new model, that they're going to be more excited to be here. And that number in that estimated of 114, that is a real number. That's not an estimate if we can open up seats and add more students. 114 of the 204 are school choice. That is a known number for our structure currently. Could some leave? Sure. But keep in mind, I still hope that 204 is a conservative number. Dave Leonard opened up more seats so that we can increase our enrollment, and that's not shown in here. If we open up more seats, it could be more school choice students, which would, of course, increase that 114 to 120. And that if we were to fulfill those open seats, that's really going to help us financially. From the internet?
Because this kind of takes us down.
All right, we have opened up discussion on the compensation part of this resolution. Is there further discussion, further speaking to this, although there hasn't been a motion made, so I guess we have to have a motion. I would accept a motion to accept.
To accept the presentation as proposed.
Okay, a second? Wait a second. Now, is there further speaking to this part, the compensation part, as it would apply to teachers and Pastor Scoggins?
Yeah, that was my question. Is Pastor Scoggins involved in this ownership exercise?
I'm going to suggest that Pastor Scoggins' compensation be tied in with this same model unless there's objection to that. Of course, you can always amend that.
It is what we have budgeted.
Yep. Further speaking to this motion to approve this compensation package or outline for our teachers and for the call of Pastor Scoggins to serve as a pastor at our congregation or of our congregation. I'm not seeing anyone. All right. We got a second over here. Yep. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. That passes. Let's move now to the teacher calls as they are outlined on page 5 of 7.
Just working backward with tuition, just kind of be the in-between.
Yeah,
Mr.
you want to
Moderator.
approve tuition, don't you?
My recommendation, in the same vein of getting our teachers all aligned, I think it goes a long way to set our tuition rates. You can see the rationale in there, and I'm welcome for some discussion on whether it's prudent to wait for the church budget to solidify, but I really see as people come in to visit our schools, saying how much is tuition, unsure is not a really good answer, and so that's why my recommendation is to approve the tuition rates as outlined.
To your point, I spoke to our secretary at Freedom's today, and she said she wants our tuition 2 weeks ago.
So people are starting to ask, what is it going to cost next year? And it seems prudent for the congregation to approve the tuition
People
for
are excited.
21-22.
They want to know.
I still move
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
tuition as presented.
Okay, we got a second. All right. Any further discussion on the proposed tuition? We had like 3 seconds. It's got to be really tough to be a recording secretary when everyone has a mask on too, huh? I think that's Tom Veith back there. Hi. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? That passes. The slate for the teaching assignments now. I'm just going to have you again stand up in case there are questions or debate. Can I get a motion to accept the slate as far as the teaching assignments? So we have a motion, we have a second? We have a second over here, Scott Menke again. Any further discussion or speaking to that motion? Otherwise, all in favor, and I should add, this does not include the pastor, the school pastor, okay, even though it's listed here. Noted, right? Okay. So everybody except the school pastor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? And then the final piece is the proposal from the Joint Church Council to assign pastoral roles, these 6 pastoral roles. But we were suggesting now just to accept a motion to issue a call to Pastor Scoggins. And then the other 5 guys are leaving and we're going to let him take care of this all. Wouldn't that be funny? Yeah.
Well, I just, again, we came today with a presentation that's in front of us. It's kind of been modified. You know, certainly we continue to try to work within the framework of everybody kind of agreeing and nobody moving too fast. And I thank you for all the school call proposals, the tuition proposals. Those are very helpful. With regard to the pastor proposals, might I offer, again as a discussion point, would it be possible to extend those calls yet tonight and to leave it to the church finance team to solidify? Maybe part of that motion could be, will not be making less than current. And I only bring that up because, as I mentioned earlier, we're not cracking open the full financials for people to view anyway. We're relying on the church finance team expertise. So I didn't get a chance to kind of discuss this. I wish I would have had more time to maybe regroup and say that. And so I just wanted to offer that as a thought. But knowing that if our church finance team and others are uncomfortable, my vote goes to always being more cautious than, and with this weird thing. I would force a vote if, again, we had solid bylaws and things and felt comfortable with doing that. I think it's important that we all move at the same pace. So I just wanted to bring it up as a discussion point.
So it's really left to the will of the body in terms of what motion you would like to put on the floor. I would entertain a motion from anyone.
Well,
I'd make a motion that we accept the recommendations that were made under the pastoral section of this package and put it in place. Two things. One is I have a great deal of confidence and trust in the people that we put in responsibility for our financial picture. And secondly, going into the future, I put my faith in the Lord that He's going to provide what we need. So I move that we accept the recommendations that were made in here regarding the pastoral responsibilities and calls.
But as far as compensation goes, just to clarify what you're suggesting, you're saying the whole kit and caboodle.
Yes.
So Larry's got a whole kit and caboodle motion on the floor. That we would call the pastors and then base their compensation on the schedule that is whatever part of the presentation, part 3, I think. We had a second for that. Speaking to that motion.
well, when you get to the discussion part of that, again, I mean,
We're there.
You have to recall that the church finance team, which I don't know if I'm an adjacent member or a member of it, but being involved in those conversations, I keep echoing. I like what you're saying, Larry. I also don't want to move faster than if that body is not ready to do so. So I would also think that part of if we're going to make that motion, would have to be
Or he already has.
delegating to that body to solidify it. Okay.
You
That was
have to
part of
make an
it.
amendment
Okay.
to his motion.
Greg, what do you think?
I'm not an expert on the Robert's Rules of Order. I'm supposed to be a moderator.
As I said, there's...
I will. Committee work's always fun, and there's an awful lot of work with it. I would have brought, and I was prepared to support, the pastor call positions with this, and the spreadsheet is finished. There's some really good points, and I appreciate all of the finance team who weighed in at the very last second, by the way, too, because most of these emails happened in the last 6 hours, roughly. So I appreciate all their thoughts with it. And the thought was we didn't have, and I think one of the members said, because we lacked unanimous support. And with a lot of the things, I don't know if it's unanimous, but we've had overwhelmingly strong support on almost everything we've done. And this issue has been tough. So I would be very supportive of maybe amending it, although I would support it. If that was the way the vote went, I would actually support that. I just want everyone to know that there is one piece of the puzzle with Pastor Newman's specific salary that still is a work in progress because of his parsonage equity allowance, which we could work that out. I think we're real close to that. But it was very close to, it was mixed tonight on the finance, and I guess I'll just say that, and I'm seeing some heads nod. And that's why I didn't push the issue, because I appreciated, I think, Dick, you made the comment late this afternoon that, hey, we've really been good with everything we've done to really been moving by consensus. Let's take a step back because maybe we don't have that unanimous support. So that's why it didn't come through. We got a motion on the floor, a good one. However this body chooses to go. We are prepared and have a plan to do that. If that would be the wish of the voters, we can do that. Again, part of the thought of some of the finance team was, we really would like to hopefully bring that insurance piece up, if we can. And the compensation piece, less insurance, I think is nailed down. I think there's unanimous support. Committee members, are we good with, I'm looking, how do we feel? Ron, we good with the comp? It's just the insurance piece? And the one housing situation. Yeah, so again, it was the issue that seems to have our committee divided is not the salary, but the insurance piece and perhaps what I would call the equity allowance. So, what would the variance be? Well, the insurance piece, the housing equity piece could be realistically hundreds of dollars to a couple $1,000s max. Not compared to the budget that we have in front of us,
A minimal part.
very, very minimally.
Relative to the issues that you're discussing appropriately that you bring up, those can, if we pass this resolution as it is, those are things that can be addressed when we get to presenting the congregation with the formal budget that we're going to go into the next fiscal period with.
And that was the plan tonight, was we would wait to do that very piece other than Pastor Scoggins. The plan that you've approved or will approve for Pastor Scoggins is exactly the plan that
Would apply to the other.
everybody, all the pastors here would be under that plan. It's only the equity allowance amount for Pastor Newman that is still being worked through, and the insurance piece.
Well, and the other point that you made earlier, which is your income, your revenue stream
We don't know.
is not as certain
Sure.
as the school revenue stream.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big part of the,
So I
of
hope
the
that
equation.
helped and not confused.
To the motion.
On the internet, there is a concern that we're moving too fast in regard to the pastor call motion. He is for making the calls, but there was a reason why the finance committee was wanting to wait, and he was offering his support to that.
To wait as far as compensation goes. Yes.
Is it a feeling from the finance committee you're 95% there?
I would say yes.
In my opinion, if you're 95% there, I would be willing to, I know I think I seconded the motion. I would be willing to amend the motion to say, give the finance committee the approval to make a final decision on the insurance piece and that housing piece.
You're saying trust the joint church finance team, because they were the ones that were going to make the decision anyway and present it to you.
I think if you're 95% there, it's good enough that you can figure out that last 5% until you're, and I think I would feel comfortable amending that motion appropriately.
I would allow you to do that, except this guy knows that only he can amend this motion.
Doug?
It's discussion.
So the suggestion was, if we're 95% there, can we simply allow the finance committee to work on the insurance number especially, but then move forward with the compensation and the housing essentially? Yes.
So to that point, though, my only concern is we're 95% perhaps there as far as the expense side goes, but we have not really a good clue on the revenue side.
Yeah, the
Until we
revenue side
have
seems to be a bigger issue.
that piece of the puzzle, especially as the money flows from the church to the school, there's a big unknown there. And if we make a lot of decisions on an assumption, and if that doesn't pan out, it's much harder to backtrack on things if we had to than it is to add on going forward or wait a little extra time here until we can get some other numbers put together. Again, they're going to be projections, but right now we don't really have the projections from the school, or I'm sorry, from the church that I'm aware of. And that's my big challenge with the thing.
And I'm going to step out of my moderator's role just to make this comment again. The advantage you have with the other 5 pastors is, should the budget committee or finance committee come back and say, you know what, we're $65,000, $70,000 short on the revenue end, all of the pastors would be eligible for calls to serve elsewhere. Again, not that any of us are looking to get away, but there's a release valve there that it's not available with the teaching staff or with Pastor Scoggins right now. So, Terry.
Your point is quite valid, but I guess I bring up a point. Are we really going to know by the end of February, as Greg said, anything more definitive than we are now? COVID's not going away anytime soon. Are those 7 weeks really going to be that beneficial to the thought process?
Are the 7 weeks going to be that beneficial to the overall financial picture?
I mean, I would comment that I believe we're going to do a look back of more than just this year. We're going to look a year or 2 back, so we can kind of go in a normal year. This is what all 4 groups were offering. So I mean, I believe that once the joint finance team has it, it's going to really shed a lot of light on things. But to your point again of the issue of this little variance on the housing allowance, you know, unless we're talking about not calling a pastor potentially and wanting to reserve our right, then I would think that we're. And again, when we did our whole joint unification, part of the discussion was we're not struggling financially. We're trying to do this to grow and to have some synergies and some realignment. So as we're at discussion, I just wanted to add those comments.
Way in back there. What is the combined membership right now? Bethany's is about 800 baptized members. What's Frieden's at these days, baptized? Okay, 815 for Frieden's, and it's, I think, what, 350, 400 at Mount Zion? I can't hear what he's saying, but I'm going to stick with my number. He's thinking. Oh, he's thinking. 320? Okay, 320. That's baptized. Average worship attendance right now at Bethany, we've gone down 50% from 300 on a weekend to 150. A little bit better these, recently. Frieden's, worshiping regularly.
Right now, we're worshiping about 100 a weekend.
About 100 a weekend, and Mount Zion? 65? Okay, and of course, the online worship is also taking place.
Mark, does that include virtual?
No, that just in person, but yes, there's virtual, and of course, we have online or offerings coming in from.
Freedom's has a count of virtual worship.
Oh, okay, Frieden's.
So that's about 1,900, and St. Luke's has about 50.
Correct. St. Luke's has about 50. Correct. So the motion currently on the floor is to accept, I'm sorry.
So the individual that questioned before, the original motion said he supports the, I think some of the amended motions that Chris is sharing. And another individual asked, can we step out in faith if we're 95% of the way there?
Can we step out in faith if we're 95% of the way there? I mean, again, from my own personal perspective, it's just my own personal perspective. Of course, one of the additional difficulties we're dealing with here is the uncertainty of bringing 3 congregations together in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, if you're going to try and do this the hard way, we've chosen to do it the hard way. So, yes, of course, we're all good, faithful Lutheran Christians, and we trust that the Lord is going to take care of us. You know, there's always that tricky thing between trusting the Lord and testing Him as well. So you know, he gives us the ability to look as best we can at the available information and make the best decisions, trusting that he's going to bless them. So the good news is, whatever decision we make tonight, we're all going to still go to heaven, and there are no budgets in heaven. All right? So Jesus is going to work it all out according to his will. But yeah, would all of us like to have a crystal ball? Sure. Ron? So Ron Altergott just made the point, as a member of the Finance Committee, that while the school board has been working on a budget, and they have a lot of templates even to work with, for many weeks already, the Finance Committee has really only started to look at congregational budget the last couple weeks. And whereas again, the school has some certainty with the revenue stream, the congregation is in the middle of some pretty special uncertainty as far as revenue currently. So as much as we'd like to be able to say history says, well, this is, of course, very, very unique in history, that what we're under right now. Back here.
We're looking at the proposal that's on the table. I guess I'd be supportive if it was one-year calls. Because that gives us the stability for past year, and then it gives us a chance to look at the budget.
Paul Otto says, if it were 1 year call compensation package, that would be one thing. But if it's what would normally be the case, of course, permanent calls, you know, unconditional calls, that's a different scenario. Agreement that we would be moving too quickly on pastors to approve it all right now. Hey! First time caller. And again, I know you're getting tired of me saying it, the advantage with the 5 pastors is we have more flexibility as far as our service in the church goes. We just do. Whereas the teachers and Pastor Scoggins are in a different situation than the 5.
Just, it's important to remember as we go through this also that what was discussed in the meetings that we got through the summer, the great part is we're in the best financial position, at least what he said, that we've been in years. Because that's our historical performance. That's the benchmark measure against, not what we're in now.
So Terry made the point, our historical performance has been good congregationally, and we're in a very strong financial situation, the 3 congregations and then coming together. Is that, would you say that's currently still the case?
And again, I don't want to speak for the whole finance committee, but I will say this. Personally, I believe one of the last things that I will tell you, just about the last thing I would support, if it turns out at the end of the day that we are, I'll pick a number, $50,000 short of what we anticipate income to cover expenses. The last thing I would recommend is eliminating a pastor, because I believe our pastors are part of our growth engine to grow the church. Now, I will tell you there's other things we could do, and Scott could probably confirm some of this, but we have significant reserves that if we had to use $50,000 in 2021 and $50,000 in 2022, and I could go on for a number of years with the reserves that we have. Now, we don't want to advertise that, but again, I think your pastors are part of your growth engine of the new church. So I can only speak for myself, but I would be strongly against in 3 months we come back and say, let's just say we've got a deficit that we're projecting, I would consider our pastors an investment, and I would not be in support of one-year calls, because I believe they're part of our future growth. And if you believe in that ministry, I think you've got to support and trust. I appreciated that comment of trusting, because that's the last place I'd want to cut. That's just my personal opinion.
Pastor Gordy, from the internet.
Yep. I guess also from the internet, several comments to the effect that basically Joy Lee said it the best. Pastors have probably a longer window for calling. So if we, and I think I told her that sounds just like you, and that she feels, why not wait? Because we have time with the pastors. And that does seem to emphasize a couple of the comments I'm receiving.
Yeah, of course, the pastors currently have calls that extend all the way to June 30th. And yes, there is no calling window for the other 5 remaining pastors. There is actually a little short time over Christmas and Easter where you can't call a pastor, but other than that, we're open. Again, not that I'm saying any of us is interested in going anywhere, but.
Moderator, we've heard from a lot of people. I don't know that we're at 100% support to the motion. How would you like to conclude this without having bylaws that tell you that it has to be a 2/3 or 51% or 90%?
Well, the motion on the floor is to move forward with calling the pastors according to the compensation schedule that was established and used for the teachers, all of the pastors.
Correct.
And we have a second on that. We've had discussion. Any further discussion on that motion?
I just want to highlight, there is a compensation piece to Pastor Newman's parsonage that if this would pass, I would ask to defer to the Finance Committee to resolve that piece of it.
Right.
Kathy, do you have that reflected in the earlier minutes or in the now minutes? Great.
So for everyone to hear that, Pastor Newman is the only pastor whose family lives in a church-provided parsonage. All the other pastors receive the parsonage or the housing allowance, and that's a net negative effect for Pastor Newman under this schedule currently. And as much as we don't like Pastor Newman, we don't dislike him that much. Did you hear that, Pastor Newman? So, I'm going to call the motion. Does everyone understand what it is? Oh,
I'll just say one thing. Respectfully, I decline to amend my motion. The
Okay.
motion stands as I want it to the floor.
so again, the motion is call all of the pastors to the proposed positions under the compensation schedule that has been established and already utilized for the teacher calls.
I just have to discuss that point. And the issue at hand is there is a compensation schedule, but we don't know what to put in this aspect. So if you're going to defer to what's existing, we're saying we're not comfortable with that. We have to figure that piece out. So,
Compensation by grade G.
oh, sure, the grade G, the this and the that, but like the piece of the compensation which has to do with the equity for the house, right? That would be part of the call, that would be part of the compensation.
Pastor Newman, that would be the only.
Right, but we don't know that number. So if Larry's saying that he wants to keep his motion the same and not have the finance committee
Would you be willing
figure it
to
out.
amend that portion of your motion as far as Pastor Newman's equity for housing?
I would agree with that.
Okay, he'll amend it to what Greg has suggested. So with that amendment then, point of order.
Letting them vote on it.
We're voting here, sorry.
All right.
As much as we'd like to do that, we just, unfortunately, we have to take what we have here in person. Only because we don't have any other rule at this point. So so the motion is that we would call the pastors to the positions as recommended by the Joint Church Council and that they would be compensated according to the same schedule that we approved to be used for teacher compensation, with the one addition of Pastor Newman's housing equity to be sorted out yet, so that it's not a net negative for him as far as his compensation. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All against? My hearing was that the ayes had it.
I'd like a count.
I think you need to count.
We need a count. Are we willing to do just raising of hands? Does it have to be secret? Okay, so all in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. All opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 19 to 9. 19 to 9 is what? Yeah. Some abstained. So 19 to 9, it is approved, and those calls are issued. I think that's our business. Does anyone have anything else to bring up before we adjourn? Then,
Can I just say one quick thing? I'm on the positivity train. I hope people who've been a part of church bodies for probably a longer time than me understand that there can be divisiveness at different meetings. If you guys felt the feeling in the room was of respect and mutual understanding and listening, I mean, I think we're all moving in a positive direction. And so even when there is disagreement, everybody's heard. And I really see that as us moving in the right direction, and I had to say it.
what you witnessed here is what we witnessed in our joint council meetings before this was approved. And that was a big mover too for the leaders. Like, hey, this is actually kind of fun to have discussions like this and to have thoughtful comments on both sides, etc. Not that that wasn't true of our individual churches, but when you bring gifts together, there's a lot of good discussion. We're going to close with the blessing, and then we'll send you on your way. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
If you haven't already signed in, please sign in on your way out.
Joint church council members, just stick around, please.